Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. See, I know, Mike, you're an old school rocker, so you'll know that that's as close as we can get to Guns N' Roses without getting a copyright infringement.
That's what that's from.
So,
huh?
yeah. I told the audio guy, I was like, I'm kind of a Guns N' Roses Pearl Jam guy. He's like, I got you, bro. We won't get a copyright infringement. So, hey, I'm here with my buddy, Mike Velez, who we actually met sharing a cabin, which is kind of a weird thing to say as an adult.
Jump straight into it.
Just up right, yeah. So Mike and I, we met at Jocko Willink's immersion Jiu Jitsu camp, which is 8 days out in Maine. It's epic. If you do jiu-jitsu, if you're interested in getting into jiu-jitsu, it's probably the best $2,500, $2,200 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Like the best $2,500 I spent last year because it was 3 times a day, jiu-jitsu, great people, all kinds of great leaders, food, lodging, just find a way to get there by flight, and we'll show up. So I showed up. I didn't know a single person who was going to be there. Jumped in a cabin, and there you were, and we hit it off. Turns out you do real estate. I do mortgages. And what was more interesting is as we started to talk throughout the week, started to learn all this interesting shit about you being a serial entrepreneur. You ran magazines and businesses and hobby shops, and of course, like everybody else, you were in mortgage prior to 2008. You've had your real estate license for 25 years, and now you're building that brokerage. You got 2 awesome kids, one of which I got to meet because he was also doing jiu-jitsu the whole week, and just love that kid. He was, I can't remember his name, but we had a lot. Marcus, thank you. Marcus, shout out to you, man. Like you were wise beyond your years for an 18-year-old at that camp, and I saw him sneaking over into the corner, be like, "Hey, do you think I should smoke a cigar?" And I'm like, "No, your mouth is gonna feel like you cat shit in it tomorrow. So don't worry, your dad and I will smoke the cigars. You just hang there and have good conversation." But he was a really good kid, man. I liked him a lot, and I have yet to meet your daughter, but I'm sure I'll meet the whole family here soon. So I think for the podcast, we're just gonna label you serial entrepreneur. Is that fair? What did I miss in the bio?
Better than serial. There's other worse serial things I could be.
Totally.
Serial killer. I don't know.
So tell us about your journey, like going through, you had a soap business for like jiu-jitsu antibacterial, you had magazines, you had this, like, When does your entrepreneurial career start?
It's like ADHD where you can't keep focused on one thing.
I get you.
So let's see. If I trace all the way back, I'd have to say it was probably the 5th grade. And,
the 5th grade.
Yeah. I had some idea. My grandma gave me a cigar box, actually.
Nice.
And I had the idea, well, you know what? I'm going to tape it. I'm going to see if this kid will pay me to take his trash from his desk to the trash can. So he paid me. I can't imagine, it was like 50 cents or $1. I taped the cigar box to his desk, said, whenever you have trash, just put your trash in there, and I'll pick it up, and I'll...
Wait, this is in school? There's like pencil shavings and like Post-its or what?
Bar Elementary and Mr. Shurk, and he was cool. He's like, yeah, go ahead. I don't care. So that was my first technical business, I guess.
Was this like the rich kid in class or like this kid?
No, I don't know. I think there was more than one that did it. So I must have had a good pitch. So,
nice.
They were you're too lazy to walk 12 feet to the trash can? Let Mike empty it for you.
That's a funny story, man, because me, Andrew Medina, Steve Tan, a couple other guys, we did the same thing. Like, we won all the candy at some, like, auction that we had in 6th grade, and we're like, hey, man, what are we going to do with this $25? And we're like, all right, Andrew, on your way home, you buy a bunch of Jolly Ranchers at Smart & Final. We'll sell them tomorrow. And then we just repeated this for a bunch of days until all of a sudden the school caught on. Andrew had a couple $100s in his pockets. All of us had pockets full of Jolly Ranchers, and then we got suspended for a day for selling candy because this is before every school in LAUSD had candy everywhere. So we were ahead of our time, and that was also my first entrepreneurial journey.
So we lived close to a golf course, and my friend Eric, his dad would buy beer by the case, and so he'd have like 7 or 8 cases of beer in his garage, and we got the bright idea let's sell his beer. So we would take a case of beer and sit by
this wasn't in 5th grade.
Maybe 5th or 6th, but we would sit by where the golfers had to cross the street, and we would offer them ice cold beer, and we'd sold them beer at, I don't know, 12 years old.
Amazing.
And the golfers loved it. We were probably selling it way too cheap, but it was 100% profit for us.
Yeah, when you steal the product, the profit's amazing.
So yeah, his dad, if he had a few beers, maybe he didn't miss any cases. But so there was that, and then sold baseball cards. I had a friend, his dad and him had a card show. It's actually really famous back in LA. It's called Frank & Sons, and I would buy baseball cards from the neighborhood. We had a lady across the street. Her son had gone off to college, and she had all these baseball cards, and she offered to if I wanted them. I said sure, so I bought them from her, not by like $10, I think, but there was like Ricky Henderson rookies and all kinds of stuff, like from 78 to like 83, and so I probably sold a few $1,000s worth of cards for $100 maybe back then, looking back. But so yeah, I would sell baseball cards, and then my dad and I had a hobby shop in Rolling Heights.
What's a hobby shop, by the way? You mentioned that before we started recording, in like Hobby Lobby, where you buy garland and stuff for your wreaths, or
no, like there's a chain called Hobbytown USA.
Okay,
something similar to that. So it was we got into radio control cars when I was 5th grade, 6th grade. That was a big year, I guess.
Yeah.
So 5th, 6th grade, 11
you
years old.
At 5th grade.
And so we got into radio control cars, and my dad, he worked for Mother's Cookies, and he'd drive a cookie truck and deliver, and I'd go work for him during the summers and stuff. And my junior year of high school, we opened up a retail hobby shop down the street from our house next to a grocery store. And before that, we had electric motor cleaner that we would sell. Like we had a packaging company that they would formulate it, and we would sell that. So my dad had that kind of bug too, but he was, blue collar guy, sold cookies. But we owned a hobby shop in those years, and would sell radio control cars, models, stuff like that. And then you remember the Pog craze?
Oh yeah.
So Pogs.
I was trying to explain to my kids what Pogs were the other day. And Chris, for people that don't know, you're going to have to insert a video here of people putting the Pogs in the slammer and trying to flip them over, because it doesn't make any sense. I have no idea why they were popular. They caused so many fights at my junior high.
I still have my whole collection, just hoping they'd be worth something.
You still have your Pog collection?
Yeah, I still have 1,000 Pogs and 20 slammers.
Holy shit. I mean, I remember this was such a big deal at Roosevelt Junior High School in Glendale, California. They made a rule nobody could bring Pogs to school because Tommy Huang and a couple of these other guys, we would just get in massive fights over Pogs. And they're just pieces of cardboard.
Pieces of paper. And then we would, I can't remember, this is going back, but I would go somewhere and I would buy the blanks, basically somebody would get an aluminum bar and they would just slice it into slammers, and then I'd go to there was a burger place down the street that had a coin operated vending machine for stickers, and they had Power Ranger stickers. So I'd put the Power Ranger stickers on the aluminum blanks, and I would sell $1,000 worth of Pogs a day to these kids, all cash. So
holy cow!
I would come home and it was the counting when they're counting the money in Scarface.
Yeah.
This was ones and fives and a stack. Shoot, if anybody from the IRS, I reported it all. So
yeah. Totally reported it all. If the NSA is listening, it was all reported.
Yeah. So I was 18, 19, and I would come home with stacks. 500. A good day was $1,000, the most, but about 500 a day.
Holy shit.
For there was a few months of this. Of course, I was 18.
Yeah.
And
so you bought a car stereo,
yeah,
and a beeper.
Just blew the money. We'd go to Vegas.
Yeah, of course.
All the time. And
if I didn't discover Vegas until I was in my 30s and 40s and had more self-control, I would probably be retired. Because when you live in LA and Vegas is just 4 hours away and it's an easy weekend trip, and the $1,000 here, the $300 there, the $500 here on either gambling or booze or girls or whatever. In your 20s, you think about that. You're compound interest, overtime. I'd be retired. I'd be retired.
Don't think about it.
So, don't think about it.
So she was my girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife. She still is 4 years older than me. So I was 18. She was 22. So we would go to the casinos. She would sit down first at the tables, and if they carded her, then we would, she would split. But if they didn't card her, then I'd go ahead and sit down. And I was 18, so we were playing blackjack and craps and all that stuff at 18 in the casinos with Pog money.
So. How long you been married?
Oh, geez. Man, you're going to get me in trouble. 26 years.
What's the secret, man?
Ooh. It's been fun. I love her. She loves me. It's up and down. Marriage isn't easy.
Yeah, so. No marriage is easy. No relationship is easy. But 26 years is 26 years.
We laugh at each other's jokes, and our kids, they're great. They're awesome. So it's not easy, but it's fun.
What's the best thing you did with your kids? looking back now that they're both adults?
Oh man, I worked a lot, and so I definitely regret not spending more time with them when they were younger, especially now when you look at like pictures.
Yeah.
And or video. Just anything like sports was pretty big. I mean, my son, he did everything. Like he did t-ball, he did roller hockey, football, and it wasn't until like wrestling where he kind of excelled at that. And he didn't want to do it at all. Like he going into freshman year, I kind of forced him to do. He's on the smaller side.
Yeah.
And
because at this point you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So 5 years ago when he was a freshman in high school, you were already well deep into your jiu-jitsu journey and kind of knew wrestling would probably be good for every man.
Exactly.
And every woman. Like my daughter takes it more seriously than my son does.
Yeah, I wish I did it when I was in high school and I didn't. Yeah. And all my friends that were wrestlers, I had a lot of friends that were wrestlers, and they were all tough dudes, good guys, like just legit folks. And so I kind of forced him to do I think it was like a 2-month or a month camp. It was, drop him off, pick him up. It wasn't like anywhere far. And he did not want to do it. He was like crying about it. Like, I hate this. I'm never doing it. It was the first time where I felt like kind of really bad for being super stern. And I told him, dude, you're going to do this. You're not going to quit. You're going to finish this. And when you're done, if you want to quit or you don't want to do it again, no problem. At least you did it. But you're not. You're going tomorrow and the next day. And about 2 weeks after that, he was like starting to get in the groove. And then his first day freshman year, he was like, oh, this is the greatest. He was kind of stressing about, be going into high school. And when we were kids, we'd hear about, freshmen getting thrown in the dumpster and stuff.
Right.
And so he came back from school the first day and he was like talking about how cool the wrestling team friends were. And so he did wrestling throughout high school, and that was great. His senior year, he was like undefeated in league for his weight division, and he was at a tournament, and a guy was on his back, and he twisted a certain way, and with those wrestling shoes, man, they're planted. There's lots of traction there, and his ankle it fractured his ankle, and it was a real bad injury. Yeah. He almost needed surgery, but not quite. But that kind of ruined the rest of he was really shooken up and really broken up about it. Not because of the injury or that, just that he wasn't going to be able to be there for his team, and he would go to all the tournaments afterwards. So it really, aside from the physical side of, betterment, it showed him, he was telling me the other day we were on a walk, and he's like, what I really miss is the shared misery in the wrestling room, how we all hated it and we didn't want to be there, but we all did it together. And he misses that, and he wants to get in the military. And I'm like, well, that seems like somewhere that there's some shared misery.
Plenty of shared misery. And you can pick your level of misery. You can go all the way up to Navy SEAL or Marine or infantry in the Army or something like that and be really miserable. Or you can pick a lower level of misery, go into the Air Force and do logistics or something.
So that's where he wants to go. And my daughter, she cheered. So when he played football, he went into football because she was cheerleading, and so we would spend time at the football field. They would be practicing, and she got really good into cheerleading. She's small too, and so she was a flyer, the ones that they throw up in the air. So as a dad going to high school football games, watching your daughter get thrown up in the air and just your heart stopping on the way down to make sure that she gets caught.
Please catch her.
Yeah, that was really tough, but it was really good for her. And then when she went into college, she didn't want anything to do with cheerleading. So fair. I was disappointed at that, but at the same time, hey, that's her decision.
Yeah.
And,
Cool, man. So when you're younger, that's the Tesla leaving, Chris. There's a weird electronic humming in the background. That's the car pulling out. Just more proof that we do this in my garage. So you got it this greatest hits journey, right? Where you have the hobby shop, you start publishing magazines on RC cars and craft beer and RC helicopters, and then eventually jiu-jitsu. Where was your passion? What happened? Tell us about the entrepreneurial journey into magazines, because that seems interesting, and also you caught the tail end of it before the mass magazine publishers mostly started to die, right?
So 95, I started my first magazine, and it was a radio control car magazine. I started it from the back room of the hobby shop. So we sold, there was a magazine there was 2 or 3 magazines that we sold at the store.
What
Yep.
year was this, by the way?
This was like 95.
Yeah, because I remember in the 90s, so I would have been in high school, RC cars were a big deal.
Oh,
the gas engine and the racing. Actually, Chris's brother spent all of his allowance for like 2 years and every gift putting together this RC, and he'd want these $40 tires that his mom would be like, bro, you're crazy. Like this is a toy.
Yeah, it's crazy what you can spend.
Yeah.
You know.
It's big boy toys. So anyway, mid 90s, you start this RC car magazine.
Yeah, so I published the first issue and sent it to, just started calling hobby shops and mail it out to them. And about maybe 6 issues in, I talked to a newsstand publisher, and we got national distribution across the country. And probably about a year and a half after that, basically every major bookstore, grocery store chains. I went to Japan to cover an event, and I met this.
Wait. This is funny because we live in the world where getting new YouTube subscribers, you're like couple at a time, couple hundred at a time. You went from the back of the store by the 6 magazine to a national publisher being like, yeah, I need 10,000 copies or what?
Yeah. So the first, the numbers are going to throw me off. I think we printed 5,000 copies out of the gate, but it was free. The first issue was free.
Right.
And advice of one of my advertisers, well, put a price tag on it. I'm like, okay, but we're going to give it away for free. And that model, the free model wasn't the greatest. So we started charging for it. And so there were different steps. So I think I moved out of the hobby shop for a year maybe, rented some space for my father-in-law in Covina, and then got a place in Chino. I'm throwing all these addresses out there. But anyway, so leased a bigger space just because I needed it. And my first hire was an art director. So I was doing a lot of the stuff at the beginning. And so my first hire was this guy, Andy. And later on, he would get hired by Motor Trend from the work that he was doing for me. So really super talented guy. In fact, he's working on some layouts for my real estate stuff right now. Or not right now, but today. So super talented guy. And then in 1999, I went to Japan to cover an event, and I ran into this guy, Derek Bono.
Like an RC car event in Japan?
Yeah, it was like a world championship. So the RC business was huge, at the time relative to everything else out there. And so, yeah, I met this guy, Derek, and him and I hit it off really well. And he was working for a company out in Connecticut, and I kind of bit the bullet, and I offered him a higher salary than he was getting paid. And he accepted the offer, and he moved out here. And his girlfriend at the time worked at the same company, and they found out that he got hired by me, and so they fired her. So he called me, and he's like, hey, do you need another graphic artist? I really didn't, but I'm like, okay, we'll make it happen. So they both came out, and he allowed me to kind of work on the business, where at the time I was kind of wearing every single hat. And so I got to work on the business, selling it, working on the circulation, advertising. And I think we tripled within the next year. And
so at the height of it, how many circulars were going out? How many copies of RC? What was it called, by the way?
Extreme RC cars.
Extreme RC cars. So at the height of it, how many extreme RC car copies are going out?
So our peak year was probably 2007, and we had 3 magazines. So we had Extreme RC, we had RC Heli, which is a radio control helicopter magazine, and then we had Beer Magazine. And Extreme, I think it was 232 pages, and I want to say we were printing 65,000 copies. So
Jesus.
it was a legit.
I mean, the layout on 260 pages, even if half of it is ads that's pre-filled for you by the advertisers, that's a lot of work.
So at the peak, we had 16 employees, and I think we were just about to do 3 million in sales that year.
Wow.
And we had 3 or 4 graphic artists. So I'm kind of I'm really picky.
Yeah.
So and I always wanted to look the best, and that was something that we always got compliments on, and how good our magazines looked. And
so at this point, you're high on the hog. You're dude, I'm gonna be the next Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, it was awesome.
I'm gonna.
The magazine business back then, the internet was around, but it wasn't if you wanted to sell these little RC cars, you had to be in the magazines, and there was 4 competing. Believe it or not, there was 1 out of Connecticut, 2 out of Connecticut, one out of Santa Clarita, your area, and then us. And so it was a real competitive market, and everybody was, battling for that dollar. And then 2008 hit, October 2008. We were at a trade show. I remember we were in Chicago, and it was when Lehman Brothers went out of business or whatever. Yeah. And man, I didn't realize the gravity of what had happened until I got back into the office the next week. And every time the phone rang, it was somebody cutting their contract. So I remember within a week, I think we lost about $600,000 in advertising that was not going to be coming in. And
and it's interesting because if you think about 2008, okay, it's a housing crisis. All right, I get it. That causes some trickle down and ripple effects into the securities market, into these investment bankers. But if I know why it happened, but thinking back, why does that affect whether or not somebody's going to buy a $300 RC car? Is it just because it's a luxury item and people were racking them up on credit cards, or are people fearful? Why does the housing market affect RC cars?
It wasn't that week. It was actually the month. And if you remember, the election was going on. So I think the media just really pushed that the end of the world was coming financially, and everybody thought, shoot, I better not spend this money. So advertisers, we had companies that were, let's say they had 6 or 7 pages of ads at $2,000 a pop, and they decide they're going to scale back to a third of that or a quarter of that. So every time the phone rang, I knew it was, money that was going to be gone. And the crew, the people that I had working for me, they were really like family, So, and I didn't want to let anybody go. So I held on and thought, oh, it's just temporary. We'll get back. I'm a pretty positive thinking person. And, man, it was tough. It was tough. So going into, right now, there's a lot of talk about a recession, and people that own businesses, I'm telling them, hey, don't be afraid to let people go. It turns out to be the best thing for them, because then, they don't have, they can go find something else.
Yeah. They can be the first one on the job market to find something else.
Yeah, exactly. So the mistake I made back then was keeping people on too long.
Yeah. And
later on, it would turn out I had to close the whole business down.
Did it bankrupt the business keeping people on too long?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, I took out so much debt. I think I had a second on my mortgage, or a HELOC, and just pull from that. There's money there, and then all of a sudden that dried up. I had an extra $100,000 that I could draw from, and then I get a letter that, oh no, you don't have that anymore. So it was tough.
I will never forget. And I'll just use his first name, Al. Al came in, and this is when I realized we had real problems. I was working at Washington Mutual. I had been slinging $250,000 line of credits like they were candy, because everybody in Burbank, California, saw these massive property appreciations. A lot of people had not gotten in the habit of using their house as an ATM. So my standard client like Al would have a house that's now worth $600,000 in kind of the Rancho Old Horse District of Burbank by where Disney Studios is now. He owed $110,000 on it, and it was worth $600,000. He might be doing some renovations or buying an investment property, so we could do an easy qualifier $250,000 home equity line of credit just based on your equity. Tell me what your income is. As long as your credit score is over 720, we'll just give you the line of credit. Cool. I was slinging those like hotcakes. There was one month I think I did $11 million in line of credits, and I thought I was rich because I was making $90,000 a year or something. And he came in. He's like, "Hey Scott, what's up, man?" And he's like, I gotta take a $75,000 advance on my line of credit because I'm buying an investment property. Seems like there's gonna be some good deals in the market. Cool, man. Bring it up. Won't let me do the transaction. Bring it up. Won't let me do the transaction. And it turns out, to your point, somewhere in the covenants of page, 13 of that line of credit agreement was that the bank could cut it off at any time, even though it was a 30-year term. So when he thought he had $250,000 of available credit, they dropped that home equity line of credit down to $2,000 above his outstanding balance. And now he had a $13,000 home equity line of credit.
That's exactly what happened to me.
And it wrecked him. I remember almost watching a grown man cry because he's like, I don't have the money to buy this property without this line of credit, and I've got $20,000 on a good faith deposit that's already been released. And I'm like, I didn't know what to say, man. It was brutal. And then of course replicate that through the entire industry, and now you have a housing crash.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have that type of situation coming on, but we're definitely gonna go into a leaner time where, I think liquidity will be an issue.
Yeah.
You won't, rates might not go, sky high, but it's going to be harder to get people to lend you money.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at, COVID gave us this weird blip where everybody had to stay home, so the national savings rate went through the roof. Like, we had a positive national savings rate for the first time in a long time. 18 months later,
That's all gone.
it's all gone, and credit card debt is the highest it's ever been, and student loan debt is the highest it's ever been. Luckily, there's plenty of mortgage equity, even though mortgage debt's the highest it's ever been. Chris, maybe you can look this up. You can look up like the total outstanding, I don't know, probably credit card debt would be the best indicator. Like, where have we gone as like a national credit card debt society? Because that's the kind of stuff that scares me. Like, I think rates are going to come back down, mortgage rates. I think there's going to be some housing out there. But at some point, the borrower has to qualify. And if the borrower's $30,000 in credit card debt and doesn't feel comfortable buying a house, then you don't have a buyer, which is scary.
$925 billion at the end of Q3.
$925 billion. What, in relation, how much has that gone up over the last, year, decade, whatnot? If you can find that stat, that'd be great.
Yeah, so it was at high 600s in 2014 Q2. No, it's gone up very steeply. Like 20. Sorry, I'm looking at a graph. That's why I sound like a
30
moron right now.
30%.
It was at like $750 billion in Q1 of this year.
And now it's at $900 billion.
Yeah,
And I mean,
over 900.
Overnight. So it's gone up over 25% in overall credit card debt in 12 months.
And consumer rates have never been low.
Right.
But now they're the highest they've been. When I got into mortgage business, I was refinancing people that had like 13, 14% mortgages. And
Right.
I would sell them a 7.5, and they were like in love with that because they'd save a couple grand a month.
Right.
And I was looking at just historically, like kind of where are we? History always repeats itself. So like, where were we? And I was looking back to like 2002, 2001, and I think the Fed funds rate was around 5%, like right around, or no, it's like 3.5%, 4%. But the 10-year was like at 5%.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find like parallels now that I'm, completely immersed in real estate. I want to be as aware as I possibly can of what's going on and what's going to affect things. And I'm trying to find parallels. And it's really tough because we have so many like conflicting things going on right now. Like as far as house prices, you have all these people that have 3%, 3.5% mortgages. They're not going to give that. I mean, it's going to take a hell of a lot for them.
Yeah, they're never
give that
moving.
up. Or they're just going to find a tenant. So we're going to have this like low inventory, and then
which should kind of buoy prices because just like old supply and demand curve.
Exactly, you've got inflation, which we haven't had like we've got now. Like I'll do searches on what happened to housing prices in the 80s, and you can't find there's no perfect parallel that I've seen. Right. Just because everything costs more and our dollars are worth less, so like that's going to have an impact on housing. But if people are laying off, if we have job layoffs or interest rates go up, like just immediately, I think it was back, March is when rates started like ticking up. And I was on some Facebook group for real estate. Actually, we're in there, Lab Coat Agents.
Yeah.
And I was telling people like, don't be surprised if rates like go way up and things slow down. And the argument was, oh, well, inventory is really low. And it takes two. It takes demand and supply. So if demand falls out, it doesn't matter what the supply is. Right. Prices are going to come down. And we've seen that. I don't think we're going to see like a major crash or anything like that. But we're definitely going to see continued downward pressure.
Agreed.
So
yeah, I mean, because if you think about in like the areas that you and I have serviced, take it from kind of East LA into the NELA, Northeast Los Angeles corridor of like all the cool areas, Eagle Rock, Echo Park, things like that. A starter home now is $1 million. Well, a starter home at $1 million with 10% down, that mortgage looks wildly different at 3% versus 6%.
Huge.
And eventually a $1 million mortgage or a $900,000 mortgage at 6%, there's only a finite number of buyers that have the income to qualify for that kind of house. So there's either got to be downward pressure or just not as many houses sell, or we're just kind of in a waiting game till rates go down or inflated salaries catch up with inflated interest rates. And it's, I agree with you. I've been trying to find where's the Venn diagram of high inflation, yet still low supply, because that hasn't really shifted, and still increasing wages, which we're seeing. But kind of like everything feels a little top heavy. It's like, if you gave me $100,000 right now, just for, being a guest on the podcast, of course, I would have no clue where to put it. It's like gold's at an all-time high. Stock market feels a little expensive. Real estate feels a little expensive. You can't put it in cash because inflation's going to eat up your purchasing power. Like if somebody just gave me a free $100,000, I would have no idea where to deploy it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, out of state, I mean, that was a big thing as far as the people buying properties out of state where it's just less expensive and, the costs are lower as far as maintenance and things like that. I've actually been short selling everything. So like today the market was down. I was good. So,
yeah. You're like SQQQ or whatever it is, the triple short, the NASDAQ.
Yeah. That's a good one.
All right.
Although, man, I've gotten burned on that one too. Like
you and me
this
both.
is kind of, I bought my first stock was Atari back when I was a kid. And I used to have to watch Channel 22. It was like they would have a scroll to see if I could see Atari pop up.
Right.
And I would call I had a custodial account for trading stocks. This was like 82, 84. And I was just a kid. And I'd call, be on the phone and tell them I wanted to trade this. And then my mom would read the newspaper every day. And I'd grab the newspaper and see where my stock was.
Do you remember the good old days of all the stock in the newspaper?
Oh, yeah.
It would look like where it closed.
They're all there.
Yeah. That was amazing.
So, that was a long time ago. But anyway, so I've been doing that recently and discovered short selling. I've never done it before. And perfect timing.
So you get totally rat fucked by 2008 because you're building this magazine empire. You've got 16 employees. You got $3 million in revenue. You're doing really well for yourself. And then every phone call that you take for 3 months takes away revenue.
Yeah.
So do you wind it down? Is there any assets there to sell? Did you have a printing press that you could sell or something?
No, so I technically sold, but not really. I kind of gave the beer magazine to the guy that came in, Derek. He was into beer. I'm not a beer drinker, but it was a good idea for a magazine.
Yeah,
and
people who aren't watching on YouTube, we're drinking some Chardonnay and eating some fruit while I smoke a cigar. This is maybe the weirdest palate trifecta I've had in a long time, but it doesn't taste so bad. So Chardonnay, fruit, and a Davidoff cigar. Can't go wrong.
I'm gonna join you on that.
Perfect. So you give the magazine basically to your buddy who's actually into beer. That's cool.
Yeah. So and he did it digital for a while, and I don't know. I think he's still doing it or some form. And the other two magazines, basically, you know how they talk about what's the saying? If you owe the bank $1,000, they have you by the balls. But if you owe them a lot, you've got them by the balls. Well, so my print bill was pretty high, and so I had actually declared personal bankruptcy, and I think 2000. Shoot, it's been a while, like 2013, 2012, and that was rough. That was rough. I never thought I'd be there, but it was humbling and it was an experience. Like I had IRS debt, dealt with the IRS. So as far as when I talk to clients in the real estate side, there's nothing I haven't seen like firsthand. I've been through issues with the IRS. I've been through bankruptcy. I know what they do there. So there's a lot of information that you gather when you live things like that.
Right.
That worked out well. I mean, it ended up working out okay. And so let's see, where were we?
So where do you rebuild? Because I know then you relaunched a Jiu Jitsu magazine.
Well, so I had an acquaintance of mine that this was like 2011, and he had the idea, or he thought, hey, there's no Jiu Jitsu magazines. And he put up the money and started, formed the company. And I ran the Jiu Jitsu magazine. And then later on, I ended up buying it from him. And that was, I was a blue belt, I think, at the time.
So for people that don't know any context, it's white belt, you're a beginner, you're just getting smashed. Blue belt, about a year or two in, you actually know a little bit about what you're doing, but you're still getting smashed. And then it's another 10 years before you become a black belt. So you're a blue belt, you're brand new, and you're like, hey, this is an industry that seems interesting and is underserved because they have no magazine.
Yeah, there was one magazine, it was Gracie Mag, and half was Portuguese and half was English. So you'd read an article, you'd read the paragraph would be in English, and then the paragraph would be in Portuguese. So it was really not a good experience for readers. And so we came up with Jiu Jitsu Mag, and that was like a learning experience. It was in my wheelhouse as far as the design. I had one of my graphic artists, he ended up laying it out. And I didn't know I was a white belt, blue belt at the time when I was writing these articles. So I just interview the guys and kind of transpose what they were saying and then have them look at it and kind of clean it up. And that worked out pretty well. I mean, it grew pretty well. I think our first issue, I had all my connections with the newsstand companies, and I think our first issue was like 20 or 30,000 copies, and in Walmart, Target, 7-Eleven, all the major stores. And that went pretty well. That was pretty fun because I was into jiu-jitsu and I got to meet like all the my heroes, all the legends out there. So like Marcelo Garcia, Eddie Bravo. In fact, I think Eddie was on like the second or third issue.
Nice.
And we got a smoker, like a smoke machine, and we like just filled the air with smoke. And
For those that don't know what we're talking about, Eddie Bravo, big cannabis supporter.
Advocate.
We'll just put it that way. Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. And then Andre Galvao, just everybody you can think of has been on our or was on the cover.
And so this is something I don't understand, right? Like, you don't have like a deep jiu-jitsu background. Is it just such a draw, or was it such a draw to be in a magazine? You could just call, Galvao, the ADCC world champion, and be like, hey, we have Jiu Jitsu Magazine. We want to put you on the cover. I'll be there with a photographer and to take an interview. And they're just like, hell yeah, I want to be on the cover of a magazine. Is it an ego thing that gets you in the door? Because when I think about starting anything that has a 20,000 thing a month, widget per month distribution, that seems overwhelming, like insurmountable.
So times have changed.
Right.
So back then, actually, it wasn't that long ago. So I mean, let's say 2014, 2015.
Seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it seems forever, but internet was full blown. We had Facebook, we have Instagram, all that stuff, Twitter. Yeah, when you pick up the phone and you say you want to be on the cover of a magazine or in a magazine, it's like, yeah, sure. How cool is that? Like, you walk into an office for some company or some person, they don't have like framed tweets, on the wall. They have framed covers of the time they were in Forbes or Rolling Stone or whatever it is. So
right.
That cachet of the magazine, I don't know if it still exists today. I was in a Barnes & Noble the other day and thinking, man, who's buying magazines? There's like nothing I would buy a magazine for.
Yeah. Every time I'm at the airport, I look at like Recoil Magazine as a magazine about guns and prepping and stuff. And I kind of look at it. And then there's like DuPont Registry, which is like all the rich stuff I'll never be able to afford. And then there's a car magazine with something. And I always reach for it. I'm like, I'm not going to buy a fucking magazine. Like, I always reach for it because I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. That kind of catches my eye. That's a subject, cars, whatever, guns, whatever that I'm interested in. And then I never buy it. So I think the same. Who's buying magazines?
But I'm sure if Forbes called you and said, hey, Scott, we need you to, we're doing an expose.
I would immediately lose weight, get my hair cut. I would be like, hell yeah, I would.
Exactly. So yeah, the magazines, like in the RC business, I was I went to Finland, I went to Japan, I went all over the world, covering events and meeting all the, the high-end people in that business. And with beer, I had a beer with Jim Cook, the founder of Samuel Adams. That was pretty cool. There was this guy, Dogfish Head Brewery.
Yeah.
It blew up. But before, like when they first started, man, I can't think of, Sam is his name. Sam and his wife, like met them when they just started. And it was a cool vehicle. Like it got me I did my best to express how cool things were to the readers, and so they felt like they were, there with us.
Right.
And then in jiu-jitsu, just like meeting. So like when I first was doing articles with people when I was just beginning, it was so far over my head. I was just doing my best job to kind of communicate what they were saying to the reader.
Right.
And then later on, as I got more into it and my skill set improved, I was able to understand things more. So like going back, I remember one of the first or second issues, we did an article with Lucas Leitch, Check Matt, and he did a half guard thing. And out of, let's say, 5 or 6 techniques he showed, maybe one of them I like really comprehended. And then years later, I go back to that article and it's like, oh man, it was like mind blowing. It was like how good the content was that he was sharing at the time that I didn't appreciate. And later on I did. And
it's like if Chris walks up, we had a guy, Jordan Worth, in here. He's a brown belt at 10th Planet. And if Chris had to interview Jordan's like, so the first thing you do is you go to Ashigarami. Chris will be like, all right, how do you spell Ashi? Like, what the fuck is that, right? It's like, I mean, you were almost at that time translating a different language.
Yeah, so like with the helicopter magazine, I couldn't fly a radio control helicopter. It was like super hand-eye coordination. And so I would just interview, like companies would send me $1,000, $2,000 worth of helicopter. and I would give it to one of the guys that I knew at the field, and he'd build it, and I'd take pictures, and he'd fly it, and I'd ask him how it felt and this and that, and translate it into an article. And so did the exact same thing with.
So in all these magazines, you obviously had an art director, but you're doing the interviews, you're finding the talent or the guests to interview, you're managing the business. Like you were really like a one-man publisher.
So yes and no. So like, have you heard that book? What is it? The Six Geniuses. It's like the number one. It's like on the top 10 business bestsellers right now. It's about six geniuses, and everybody's got these six geniuses, and some are good, and some you fit and you don't. Anyway, one of my two are invention and discernment. And so inventing, like, I love to start things. So starting the magazines with the car magazine, it was probably like 2 or 3 years before I kind of got a team behind it, and then they kind of took over it. So from the day-to-day, as far as like writing stuff, I wasn't doing much of that. Then I started the helicopter magazine, same thing, like did that hard work to get it going. And then found, like, I hired somebody from Oregon and flew him out, and he moved down here. It was a real business. So, like, and he became the editor and the publisher, or the editor of the magazine. And then he hired a team member. So, that was what he was into. That's what he was passionate about. So, on the beer side, I would write articles, and I would just do a shit ton of research. I'm not a beer drinker, but I can tell you how a lager's made. I can tell you where they store it. I can tell you its history. Tell you what's the difference between lager and the ale and the temperatures that they would ferment it at, or, so it was just a lot of knowledge, finding that knowledge, doing that research. And then later on, I didn't do anything to that. For the Jiu Jitsu magazine, I was pretty involved all the way from the beginning because it was something I was still like passionate about. When I had the car magazine, let's see, I started 10 years earlier. And so like 3-4 years into the RC cars, I'd been doing it for 15 years, and it's like,
I'm out.
This is the last thing I want to do is hang out at a racetrack.
Right.
But with jiu-jitsu, it's kind of one of those things, like you get so used to it, you don't feel right when you don't do it. So, that kind of carried me through with the magazine. Like it was never boring. I was never disinterested in it.
It's funny. You said something when we were at the immersion camp, because I was asking you about, your journey to black belt, and like, we're both a little older. My knees are a little tore up. And I've thought to myself, I'm like, hey, if I really stick with this with 10 years, will I ever be like a real black belt? Because in my mind, these 30-year-old UFC fighters that we're rolling with at 10th Planet, they're like the real black belts, right? Like they're actually fighting for a living. And you said something that was really good. You're like, I'm recently a black belt. And you got to think of black belts like vampires. Like when you first become a black belt, you're the little baby vampire who, you can suck some blood, you can probably fly, you can teleport, but then, you just build all the way up to Dracula, where it might as well be a different entity. And there's never ending progressions of level on black belt. And that actually made me feel better, because I'm like, all right, cool. I put 10 years into this. I can get good. At 55, I'll be a baby vampire. I'm never going to be Dracula, because I didn't start when I was 12, like some of the Rotolo brothers or whatever, starting they were 5. And you said that, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like that stuck in my mind from one of our conversations at camp this summer.
True Blood. There you go. That was the show. So you had Jessica, that was like a baby vampire, and then you had Gottfried, which was like this 1,000-year-old vampire. So it's the same thing. So like tournaments, I'm 48, and so I think I'm Masters 4. So I'll go and look to, like, Marcus, my son, he did a tournament not too long ago in San Diego, and I was gonna do it, and I looked it up, and I looked at the class and the division. There was like 2 or 3 like world champion guys. I'm like, you know what, man, dude, I'm going to be there to support you 100%. We're going to focus on you. I hadn't been training that much, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to go out there and go up against some dude that's got like 10 or 12 world championships under his belt.
Right.
But it's the same thing. Like, and black belt, it's cool because, when you go to open mat, you can kind of like, you pick who you want to roll with and stuff like that. And I'm not like the type where, like, how dare you ask me to roll?
Right.
Like, I don't give a fuck. I just want to have a good time, not get hurt.
Right.
So, and as far as age, if anything, the higher you get, the less likely you are to be, roll with somebody that's spazzing out, or how to like control them. Like the most dangerous thing is a 100 or 250 pound, 6'3" white belt.
Right.
Because he could fuck you up. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? And not intentionally,
right.
But just doing some dumb stuff with your knees in the spot, So that's the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu. And it's weird because like my dad would always say like, how could fighters like hug after a fight? Like we'd watch boxing together and he's like, I'll never get that. Like, don't you want to like kill the guy? And in jiu-jitsu, I've learned, no, there's like absolute respect. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's times you get pissed off, but for the most part, it's absolute respect. And, you know, if I'm rolling with somebody, if I know they're in a bad spot and they're going to get hurt, like, you know, I'll let them move them out of the way. You know, with jiu-jitsu, you have that, the more you do it, the more you can recognize it. So as far as age, you know, it kind of like that knowledge will come with your age. As things are more vulnerable, you'll understand, you know, that you're putting yourself in a spot, or your partner or your training partner is too.
You're way more likely to throw at your back as a spazzy 35-year-old, 25-year-old white belt than a 55-year-old black belt, because they just kind of know how to move and where to lay and where to position and when to relax. Yeah, and it's a different game. And
it's not to say that they're not dangerous. Like through the magazine, in fact, this is I'm a complete fanboy for Jocko, right?
Yeah,
so
me too.
So and my daughter's gonna give me shit for that because she always makes fun of me for I've got this Get After It cup, and I only drink out of it when I've earned it. So like lately, it's with the holidays. Haven't been earning it too much lately, so I haven't drank out of it too often. But you know, when I like crush it at the gym, then I'll drink out of the cup. Anyway, I went down there. It was for an article, and I got to roll with him the first time, and I think I just got my black belt maybe, and man, it was like a freight train. Like there was nothing I could do. I couldn't stop it, and I think he tapped me like 5 times in like 6 or 7 minutes.
It's always discouraging, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as far as, you know, don't let age fool you.
Right.
Not that I mean, I think we're the same age, but yeah, so that's a different thing. And, you know, that's getting back to jiu-jitsu. Like, man, I've had the pleasure of rolling with like some really amazing people like, Jean-Jacques Machado. And, you know, the fact that he doesn't have that hand, don't let that fool you, man, because he will mess you up.
Yeah, it's still crazy to me that one of the best guys in the world in a sport that's like so dependent on grips is missing a hand. I mean, it's just insane. Did I tell you about my funny story about Jocko when we worked together?
No.
So to dispel any myth, I was not a Navy SEAL. I was just like I was in the Army prior to 2001, so I never got shot at in anger. But Jocko's first job out of the military, the CEO of the mortgage company I was working for had either invested in his gym or they had invested in some UFC fighters together or something. So old boss of mine, CEO of the mortgage company I work for, had befriended Jocko, and they had this relationship and they had some financial arrangement. I don't really know. So Jocko gets out of the Navy and wants to get into business. So they put him in charge of like some stupid title, you know, strategic initiative of sales and operations for the mortgage company I was working for. So Jocko comes in and they have this whole like straight out of the Charlie Sheen Navy SEAL movie of like they've made this trailer for Jocko with some of his pictures interlaced with like the Charlie Sheen Navy SEAL movie, and it's way the fuck over the top, and it's like Team America, fuck yeah, you know, coming to save the motherfucking day. I mean, it was so bad. And so Jocko gets introduced to us as this guy who's going to be our new mortgage like development specialist. And I go, all of us, all the top producers were like, bro, this like Neanderthal is scary as shit. Can he even spell mortgage? And like, that was a joke. Like, hey, Jocko, do you know that like mortgage has a T in it? Of course, nobody would say that to his face because he could wreck you and destroy you. But so Jocko Willings starts at this mortgage company, and he's going around for like 6 months trying to cure problems in different departments. And at the time, I was one of the few guys that was doing a bunch of jumbo loans. So he comes, and you know how he is. He's like super intense. He's sitting in my face. Like we're knee to knee. There's not even a table. He's like, all right, Groves, tell me what's going on with this jumbo department. Like what's working, what's not. And he's like furiously taking notes. And I was the most anti-extreme ownership person at that time. I'm like, this person's fucking up. That person's fucking up. This person doesn't do that right. I'm so awesome, you know, because I'm like a 32-year-old loan officer that knows everything. And I mean, it was like the exact opposite of extreme ownership. And I strongly believe the culture at that mortgage company, the lack of extreme ownership, the finger pointing. I would love to get him drunk one day and ask him, you know, because he's not going to insult anybody, but I'd love to just give him some truth serum and be like, be honest, man. That conversation that we had about the mortgage and me not taking extreme ownership and that being the culture of this mortgage company, that's really what started you down the path. Because shortly after that, he left and started Echelon Front, which ended up becoming the consulting company and writing extreme ownership. And then like 3 years later, I see him on Business Insider, like Navy SEAL, author, and business coach, Jocko Willings. And I was like, hey, I know that guy. So one, I'm going to take some small piece of credit that mortgage company was so fucked up that it helped launch Jocko's career. And second, I remember at that time, so this would have been, I don't know, this would have been 2012. So I'm like 31, 32. We had a lot of conversation because at the time I owned a little boxing gym that was on the back of my property. We had a bunch of local kids that would come box and pay $10 a month or whatever. And I had invited him over to go boxing a bunch of times, and he had invited me to San Diego to try Jiu Jitsu. And we just like kept missing each other. And I'm like, dude, that's one strategic friendship that I really missed out on before he became a really big deal. So I like to think that effed up mortgage company, which doesn't exist anymore, they got absorbed because they could never turn a profit, helped launch his career because of how bad we were. And I always regret like not going down and starting jiu-jitsu 10 years earlier and making friends with him and the boogeyman and everybody else. Cause I was like, oh, that would have been cool to just be along for that ride as they grew into this monster company that they are now.
Yeah. Everybody that gets into jiu-jitsu later in life, they're like, fuck, I wish I would have learned this 10 years ago. 20 years ago, however long, before.
Right.
I think I started in 2009. Let me think, 2007. So, yeah, man, I wish I would have done it 10, 20 years before that.
Crazy, right? Like everything else. But, best time to plant a tree was yesterday. Second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you're thinking about starting anything, start today. Hey, I want to hear a little bit. I want to dive into real estate because now that's been your focus. I know you've had your license since 93, but that's kind of been your sole focus the last couple of years. I want to hear about the distribution of magazines, right? Because when you say we're selling 20,000 copies, and I remember going to buy, it was probably Motor Trend because I loved cars when I was younger. I remember buying a magazine for $3 or $4 or something like that. So, is 100% of the business ad generated revenue and then you're just selling the book at cost to try to get it out there, or is there actual profit? Because when you talk about, we had national distribution, 30,000 magazines in Walmart and newsstands and stuff, what do the economics of that look like? How do they make money? How do you make money?
So it was really, I'm going back. I've been out of the business for like 6 years, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. At its peak, it was basically about a 40% remittance to the publisher for copies sold.
Explain that.
Really fucked up. So let's say you print 100 copies, you distribute 100 copies.
Okay.
Let's say you're shooting for a 30% sell through. So 30 copies get sold.
Wait. So this is the first thing we got to address. If you ship out 100 magazines, 70% are ended up in the dumpster and 30% get sold?
I'm going back. My memery's not so good. I want to say 40% was like, if you were selling 40% sell through, that was great for specialty magazines. Like, if people came out with a Princess Di issue and it sold out, I mean, that's an anomaly. But the average consumer magazine, not talking about the biggest players, but specialty magazines like crafting and stuff like that.
Yeah, This Old House or
car
RC
magazines
cars or whatever.
Yeah, or full-size car magazines. So 40% was kind of like a goal, a sell-through. So 100 copies get shipped out, and let's say 40%, best case scenario, 40% of those sell. And they sell for $1 a piece, right? You get 40 cents comes back to you for those 40. So you printed 100 copies, you sold 40, and you get 40% of that. So it's, it's not.
So you make like $16?
Yeah, and you had to print, distribute those 100 copies. And so that's where the ad dollars, like, again, we're going way back in time. I can't tell you the exact ratios.
Right.
But yeah, you sell as many ads as you possibly can. Subscriptions were always great. So sometimes you would have different publishers would have different subscription models. You'd have people that needed to sell the subscriptions, and then you had companies that would sell. You'd get an offer in the mail for $1 for a year. Well, they're just selling the ad dollars, or they're just selling, the ad figures. So for us, we were a small publisher, so we relied on the subscription income. We relied on everything, basically. So newsstand, I remember this was a lesson in economics, a hard lesson. So I did a promotion in 7-Eleven, and I think it got us like 25,000 extra copies distributed for that month. Well, I had to pay for 25,000 copies to get printed extra.
And how much is it to print a 100-page magazine, 200-page magazine?
Dude, you're going way back.
Is it like $1 or $2?
No, not quite that. It was like about 75, 85 cents.
Oh, okay, so you can drive
scale.
You can drive printing way down if you're doing massive runs.
Yeah, like at the height, I was buying paper by the rail car.
Wait, say again?
I would buy paper by the rail car. So if it was about 45,000 pounds of paper that I was buying.
So like a shipping container, you're buying paper in not reams, not boxes, not truckloads,
rail cars.
Shipping container, a rail car full of
and
paper.
I'd put it on my American Express. So I had a ton of points.
Do you remember what your biggest charge was for paper? Like, did you drop like 50 G's on Amex for paper?
I think, no, I think the most I ever did, yeah, pretty much 46. It was like, man, my memory, you're testing my memory. I definitely charged 46 grand a couple times on paper.
Holy cow.
And again, this is not like this. I started from I launched the magazine with one credit card. I think my limit was like $1,200 or something like that. And I figured, you know what, I went to junior college. So, right. And I figured, well, this is my education. If it burns and fails, you know, that was the cost. And, but it was a good business for a long time. You know,
all right. So you ship out 100, maybe you sell 40, you get 40 cents per the 40. So you make $16, but you spent at least triple that on printing. So it really is all ad based. Like if you're not selling ads to you can't even get the copy out, right?
Yeah. Like you had Consumer Reports that had no advertising. And, I mean, their subscriptions were really expensive. That's a tough model. I don't know how they did it. But yeah, the whole business was broken, and it was really like there was a ton of consolidation in the print business and also in the newsstand business. So you would have territories. It was I had different publishing consultants that would deal with, you know, the circulation side, and they'd always describe it as kind of like a mafia thing. Like you had people that had the territories and they were really set on, you know, no competition coming in, and then you had this company called Anderson News that kind of consolidated everything, and they bought all the mom and pop distributors.
And where do they make their money, right? Because you send out I guess you send out the 100 copies, you sell 40 of them, and they're making 60 cents a copy. So they made $24 for doing nothing other than being the middleman, because you had to pay for the material, the shipping, you had to get everything there. They're just making 60 cents profit on the magazines you do sell.
Yeah, so it was all consignment for them. So they were just middleman working on what got sold. So you would have, let's say out of that 60%, you would have my distributor, Curtis Circulation was my distributor. And I think they would charge like 10 or 12%. And then the rest would go to the retailer that would sell it, and then to the distributor, Anderson News. So you had all these different layers siphoning off that dollar that gets spent at the newsstand.
All little taxes on the system.
Yeah.
And if you were making these RC magazines, I mean, 270 pages seems like a lot, man. Like, what was the end user, the hobby shop, selling it for? Like, what was the client paying for? $3, $5?
I think we were at $4.99.
$4.99.
Yeah,
okay.
And it was it was a sizable publication. It was 232 was the highest, I think, in counts of 8 and 16 and 24.
Yeah, that's just how your brain operates now.
Yeah, back then, man, you're bringing back flashbacks. But yeah, so that's how that would work. And yeah, as far as ad dollars, you know, every dollar. And it was like, my dad being in the grocery business, he would always tell me, well, think about it like milk. Like, right? Milk only is sellable until that date. Right. So every issue was like milk. It was going to go bad if I didn't sell it. So, you know, selling that, we would tip to anybody that wants to buy print advertising, wait until the absolute last minute to buy that spot. So it's called a remnant. And Tim Ferriss talked about it in the 4-Hour Work Week. So yeah, at the end of the month or the end of the cycle, if there's empty space, it's going to go empty. You know, if it's better, you know, sell it at a discount and get something for it than let it go.
Oh, that's interesting, man. So it leads to real estate. And I always joke with my friends that are realtors. I'm like, yeah, every really successful realtor I know failed at one or two other businesses and built a sphere of people who then they realize they can sell houses to. Because if you don't have that sphere of influence, you don't make it the first couple years. So a couple years ago, I know you've had your real estate license since 93 and you kind of dabbled in it. You did loans for a couple of years, made great money prior to 2008. What made you decide, I think right before COVID, hey, you know what? I should just go all in on real estate. Like that makes sense for me.
So I think I thought about getting back into the business back in 2017. So I let my license go actually. So I had it for 4 years and then I never renewed it. And then did the magazine thing. And then I think 2017, 2016, I think I signed up to take the classes. And as you know, it's not a big barrier of entry to get your real estate license.
Not at all.
So I started the courses and then I just blew it off and stuck with the magazines and tried to reinvent the wheel, trying to come up with something that would catch people to make it a viable business. And I did a subscription box for a while, which was pretty cool. I bought a couple of different boxes that were out there for jiu-jitsu and put them together and then used the magazine as a vehicle to promote it. It's a cool business. In fact, it's still alive today. I brought on a partner and he ended up buying me out. And it's called the bjjbox.com. And so every month you get jiu-jitsu stuff, which is cool if you're into it. And then I decided, had enough and folded the magazine. The last issue was actually my going to Maine for the camp back in 2018, I think.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny. There's another, you wish you would have back then.
Right.
So I met Pete from Origin when when they kind of first started.
Yeah, Pete, the co-owner of all the stuff with Jocko. They do the boots, the vitamins, the drinks, everything.
Yeah, so another thing where the magazine got me entree is he invited me out there when they opened the factory, the first factory, which was basically a garage or a barn back then in the woods. And went out there, hung out with Pete, got to meet him, got to meet the crew. And I thought he was nuts. He had all this equipment. Like John was cutting geese with a jigsaw, like, it was crazy. And and then going back, then I went back for that last issue was me going to the camp and the grand opening of their 10,000 square foot warehouse. And when he was posting pictures of that 10,000 square feet, I'm thinking, he's nuts. What are they going to do with all that space? 10,000 square feet, that's a big building.
To make geese, which is like such a specialty product.
Yeah, and oh shoot, I'm going to go down. I don't think it's proprietary information, so I'll go and talk about it. So Pete and we would talk quite often. So we would call each other, and I send him the Blue Ocean. I thought that'd be a perfect book for him, and sure enough, man, he has built a Blue Ocean. And so we would talk all the time, and he saw that I had done an interview with Jocko. And he called me a couple weeks after that when it came out, and he's like, hey, what did you think of this Jocko guy? Because he didn't know anything about him. And I'm like, oh, super serious guy, really good, real good information. And I guess Jocko had approached him he's told the story on Rogan and stuff.
Right.
He had pitched him, the idea of buying into Origin. And I guess Marcus Lemonis was also talking to Pete at the same time. And he's like, I don't know what would you do? Who would you go with? And I'm like, Jocko, his audience is more likely to buy geese than, somebody else with a ton of, bringing a lot to the table, but not as unique to what Jocko brings. And, so then, that because of that phone call, because I gave my stamp of approval, I'm just kidding. Later on down the road, man, looking back, this is.
And you're part of the story. It's cool.
Well, it's, and I'm the only one that, it's a big deal to me, but nobody else cares.
Right.
But I remember Pete called me so Pete bought a company called, Q5, and it was a supplement company. And this guy, Bill, ran it. Super good guy. I knew Bill. He did some stuff in the magazine, and we had a real good relationship. And Pete bought it from Bill, and he asked me if I wanted to be a 10% owner.
Oh.
And it was $10,000. And I could have swung it, but I'm like, I wanted to focus on the magazine and just, really focus on that. I didn't want to, dilute my energy. And I was going to be the marketing side, the magazine, and bring that to the table. Well, that's Jocko Fuel, which you and I both know now is
a $20 million business at least. Yeah.
So yeah,
So when Jocko, when Origin or the Jocko supplements or Jocko Fuel goes public, just ignore that. Just ignore all of that. Okay.
Jiu-Jitsu's calmed me. So hey, it happens.
Lost opportunities. It happens from time to time. So you decide to get your real estate license, and why not also become a broker and open your own business and have your own brand? Because that's what you do.
Yeah, it's in my blood. So when I got back into the business,
just out of curiosity, do you get bored of this stuff and you just got to move on to something else? Because we've already told the story 5 times where it's like, I just gave the business to this guy, I sold it off. Hey, bad timing, it didn't work out. Like, should you know about this about yourself now? Like, I'm gonna grow a real estate empire in 7 years. I need to have an exit strategy because I'm gonna get bored, or is it just been weird circumstances each time?
No, I don't know. I guess. Yeah, I don't, that like tenacity. That's one of those geniuses in the book. I don't have the tenacity. It's like the bottom on there. And that's like sticking through to the end.
Right.
So I'm good at starting things. It's like a Seinfeld episode. You're good at holding the or you're good at taking the reservation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm really into it. I really like it. And it's one of those things where I like to talk a lot. I like to show people how much I know, which is kind of like a know-it-all,
right?
Which can be a asshole trait. But if your realtor knows what he's talking about, I mean, it makes you feel better, right?
Right.
So, and I've met a lot of really cool people. Like I've got clients that have, in fact, that first year, actually he wasn't, so Andrew, you met Andrew and my nephew Dylan. Well, the year before we brought out Joe, who we called Jiu Jitsu, and he had barely done any jiu-jitsu prior to the camp, but I sold him and his wife a house and we hit it off, and we're like good buddies today. We have a book club with Andrew that we do every Sunday morning, and
nice.
So we talk. So I've formed some really good relationships from real estate that I'm super appreciative of. These two, Matt and Laura, we just closed today on their sale of their house, and I told them I'd mention them in the podcast, so
nice.
I'll clip this and send it to them. I met him at an open house and we hit it off. I was wearing Birkenstocks and shorts and the shirt, or one of these shirts, at an open house. And then the other day I asked him, hey, can you guys write me like kind of a little, a little recommendation or something? And he pointed out Matt was impressed in my confidence to wear sandals and shorts and a shirt at an open house. So these are my people anyway. So no, we're friends now. Like, they're super cool. We're going to hang out. And actually I had them over to my poker night, like 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I like it. I can't remember what the fuck your first question was. That's another thing too, is ADHD runs deep.
Yeah, no, we start talking about this stuff and it's just like the interest in building a real estate brand. It seems to fit you, right? Like obviously from your time in the magazine and publishing and whatnot, you've got to know how to network, right? You got to know how to tell a story. I follow your Instagram posts. What's your Instagram, by the way?
Bold Agent,
shameless self-promotion. And I actually enjoy it, right? Because you give the real talk. You're like, hey, by the way, you're like, here's some shit that's going on with California taxes. Whether you're thinking about coming here because you make so much money you don't care about the taxes, or you're thinking about moving because the taxes are kicking your ass, I'd love to be your realtor. And I was like, good for you for calling it like it is, because like taxes inform a lot of people's housing decisions.
Absolutely. So there's people will say, like, I'll see realtors on Instagram or Facebook, and they'll talk about NAR's stats and this and that, or there's one, Keeping Current Matters, that gives you like not demographics but data, but it's always painted in the best possible light for you wanting to go buy or sell a house.
Right.
And sometimes it's not always the right time to buy, or it's not right time to do things. It's different for everybody.
Right.
And I don't like putting things, I want to be able to stand behind my words. And that was the thing, like, so with the magazine, being a publisher and editor of the magazine for 20 something years, everything that I would write in an email or in a letter or anything like that, I would always write it from the standpoint of, can I defend this? Like, I don't want to put anything out there that I can't defend or I can't back up or stand behind. And so when I would write an email, I would think, some Reddit, this was before Reddit, these were boards, the message boards.
Right.
And, somebody would be complaining about the magazine, and I'd go on there and I'd try to be as professional as possible and like defend whatever was in the magazine. Usually it was like, oh, you said this about this fuel and it doesn't burn at that temperature or whatever. So I was always kind of careful to, stand behind what I say. And sometimes people will just throw up stuff there to, get attention or, to push people. Like the worst thing I would ever be guilty, or the worst thing I would ever want to be accused of, is pushing somebody to do something and make a decision.
Right.
So it's their decision. I'll give them all the information I can possibly come up with. And if I can't, like I've got a pretty good network. Like my real estate attorney is a jiu-jitsu guy. And so like, if I have questions that I can't answer or I don't want to practice law, so I'll call him, and, Ryan, shout out to Ryan. He'll give me the skinny on what's going on, and I'll convey that to my clients. So yeah,
it is interesting how much there's that trust, right? Like if you trust somebody to, and I mean this seriously, if you trust somebody to not snap your neck when you're in a weird compromised position, you definitely have this like camaraderie or this brotherhood to be like, hey man, like I don't need a whole legal dissertation. Can you just give me the skinny on this real thing, right? Where a lawyer especially be like, well, let me dig in and understand the situation. It's like, no, dude, just give me the skinny. We trust each other. Whereas like one of the guys at the jiu-jitsu, I mean, I think I know his last name. He's going to come borrow my car, house sit, and walk my dog and feed my dog when we're out of town next week because we're going on vacation in between Christmas and New Year's. And it's like, I just know from our interaction at the gym, I can trust this guy to not go through my drawers and like try to steal my, coin jar or whatever. I just know that there's like a trust there. Cause when you have that physicality and it's like, hey, if I turn this way on accident, I'm going to blow out your knee, and vice versa. Cause we're practicing some weird leg lock that I don't understand. Like there's just a level of trust there where it's like, of course that person's going to do business with you. Of course, when I need a house sitter, I'm going to trust that person over maybe somebody I've worked with in the past. It's just really strange.
It's not there aren't bad apples. There definitely are, but Rogan's talk about it. It's like it weeds out people that either their egos are too inflated, and if you have a big ego, you see the guy, he comes into jiu-jitsu and he doesn't want to give up anything, and he gets his ass kicked, and
Never comes back.
You can't laugh. Yeah, exactly. If your ego's hurt, you're not going to come back.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get your ass kicked. There's always somebody bigger, badder, better, faster.
Yeah.
Better looking, everything.
This is funny. The other day, I go to the morning class, and I haven't normally been going to the morning class. So I go to the morning class, and my buddy Jordan's teaching the class, and we do something. And there's a guy over the corner, clearly was like a ex-Division I wrestler. Like he's older, right? You can tell he's a little weathered, but he's got like real man strength, some cauliflower ear, square jaw. Looks like he wrestled in Iowa. And I'm like, whatever, dude, let's go. Dude proceeds like to just throw me around like a fucking rag doll and taps me out about 10 times in a 5-minute round. And after the class, I go up to Jordan. I'm like, hey, Jordan, can you just tell me that guy's pretty good or a black belt or something? Or am I just like that much of like a pansy when it comes to jiu-jitsu? He starts laughing. He's like, you don't know who that is? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, that's so-and-so. He's the ex light heavyweight champion in the UFC, and he's probably like a 3rd degree black belt. I'm like, all right, cool. He's like, yeah, if he wanted to, he wouldn't have tapped you 5 times or 9 times in a 5-minute round. He would have snapped your back 9 times in a 5-minute round. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Appreciate him not injuring me before I had to go sit at a desk for 8 hours. But yeah, there's a level of trust where it's like,
sure.
that guy was super humbling, or no, he was super helpful to me in my growth. And he had to humble himself to like basically come down to my level of athleticism and skill so that we could get in. And, he got in a good physical 5 minutes of cardio as he was whooping my ass. But that I haven't seen that level of trust if you walk into a boxing gym or a CrossFit gym. People are trying to like show how much weight they can throw up. There's a weird trust in the jiu-jitsu community, which was not the point of what we were talking about today, but it seems to keep coming up.
So before I got into jiu-jitsu, my buddy Aaron and we got into Western boxing. And that was kind of like the first, I think I tried like Jeet Kune Do after the Bruce Lee movie came out for like a month. It wasn't real. I don't know what it was. Anyway, so before I got into jiu-jitsu, I started Western boxing and did that for a while. And my buddy and we got into Muay Thai, and we found this trainer, and we would show up at his house at 5 a.m, and he'd open the garage and we'd sneak in and warm up. And he wasn't really a morning guy, so it didn't work out too long. And so we went to this gym out in Riverside, and the first class, like not first time, but pretty early on Muay Thai. We never like really sparred Muay Thai, just Western. And the instructor throws like a roundhouse like head kick, like from the start, like immediately. And I'm like, and all of a sudden,
I mean, that can knock you out or kill you.
yeah, it was a hard kick. And I sound like a puss. Anyway, but that's not what you do like a student that's just coming in. I don't know if he had to show me that he could do it or what, but it became like, let's go 50%, and then it becomes 51, 50. And before you know it, you're trying to kill each other. And that's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu. Even if it gets to that level, you're not going to kill each other.
Right.
But it doesn't get like that too often. You know what I mean? And when I discovered, that was before I discovered jiu-jitsu. And then I got into jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, oh, thanks. I don't have to get punched in the face to get that same competition, thrill. And then about a year or two after starting, my school started a Muay Thai class. And so I got all my old gear out there and then started sparring, and same thing. And I'm like, there's a reason I don't like sparring.
Right.
With strikes. But anyway.
Getting punched in the head is no fun. So what do you think for the Southern California real estate market? We kind of hinted towards it. Like, we're probably not going to see a massive drop in prices, but there is definitely a recalibration where sellers get it, right? Like they can't get top dollar, no contingencies, all cash, close in 7 days. Like it seems like the market is, I guess, evening out a little bit, right? Instead of an extreme buyer's market or seller's market or lender's market because the rates are so low, it's like, all right, everybody understands there's like some deal making to be made. What do this, for context, we're filming this in December of 2022, probably won't drop till February of 2023 because for one of the first times we're way ahead of schedule on our podcast. But what do you see if you're giving somebody advice going into 2023 into the housing market, specifically in Southern California?
If you're selling, if you think you want to sell in the next year, do it now. Don't wait. Things aren't going to get better. I mean, you're going to have an uptick in you're going to have more buyers coming on the market cyclically, March, when spring kind of starts. But everybody and their brother that's thinking, oh, I'm going to wait, they're going to put their house on the market at the same time. So if you're thinking of selling, do it now. Don't wait. If you're a buyer, if you have a need, like if you really, like I've got people like sold a condo to this young couple. They've been living with their in-laws for I don't know how long, and
they have to have a place to live.
Get out. Yeah, right. So they got a good deal. They're happy. They got the rate. They can afford it. If rates come down, hopefully they're in an equity position. Actually, they went in with a fair amount down. That's one thing. Like I'll hear the term "marry the rate" or marry the house,
date the rate, marry
rate.
the house. I hate that. It's like you might be stuck with this mortgage forever, dude.
Yeah, if the equity is gone and you can't refinance or you lose your job, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So
or rates just don't go back down. Like 5 or 6 is not bad.
Yeah,
historically.
It could be this way for a while. So, don't count on that. If you're going in with 20% down, you've got that cushion, you probably can date the rate. But if you're not doing that, don't plan on that. Nothing is, who knows what's going to happen. And, just like there could be some black swan event that, nobody sees coming. Or, some people, we might call them a nut that they're way out in left field right now, but they could be right. So,
right. Yeah, there's a lot of people that were way out in left field the last 3 years that turned out to be totally right.
Yeah. So don't, take everything in. Don't poo-poo it immediately. Look at it. It's just like jiu-jitsu. So, take in as much information you can. Like with jiu-jitsu, there's techniques that don't work for you, but pay attention because somebody might try to use them on you.
Right.
And you'll want to know how to counter them or, be prepared. So as far as if you're buying, don't go in with a shoestring, like very little down payment. Maybe rent a little longer, wait, work on your credit, build up your bank account. As far as pricing, I think we're going to see kind of death of 1,000 cuts. It's not going to be like instantly there's going to be a decrease, but over time we're going to see all these. When I go on the MLS, I look at the hot sheets and I'll look at, price changes. 95% are price decreases. Right. So, longer days on market. Sellers, if they're motivated and they have a strong motivation to move, they're going to accept a lower offer. Right. Or they're going to come up with a price decrease.
Right.
As far as like I mentioned earlier, the interest rates being so low. If you have a 3% mortgage, man, the value isn't so much the house, it's that mortgage and that payment that you have. So,
Right.
And then you have options of what you can do with the property. Maybe you can lease it out for more than your mortgage payment and have a positive cash position.
Right.
Like, why would you sell it? Or some people just don't want to deal with the headaches of being a renter or, being a landlord.
Right.
So that's going to keep inventory lower than it might otherwise be. But I do think we're going to have people that lose their jobs, and they're going to be in a position where they have to sell.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think about it for myself because like my wife and I are very happy with our house. But it's like, it's kind of track house heaven. We'd prefer to have a pool than not have a pool. We'd prefer to have a bigger backyard, maybe live in a gated community, whatever. But when I look at my mortgage, because we put a decent amount down, and it's like, all right, so I've got like 2.75 or something with no mortgage insurance. With our HOA, I'm like $2,500 a month, I could go drive Uber if I had to pay my mortgage. If Amazon Mortgage comes out tomorrow with an AI that solves and they take all the mortgage in the country, it's like, well, okay, I'll coach some people, I'll do some podcast revenue, hopefully, and I'll go drive Uber and I can make my mortgage. But if we move now and we buy a bigger house with a pool in a gated community with an interest rate that's now double what we could have got, a year ago, I'm just like, we'll make do and take more vacations. And so I think to your point, there's going to be way less inventory because what would have been a move-up buyer maybe will decide not to move up. And what would have been an empty nester sell and downsize to save money, they're like, well, it's not really a savings. I'll just stay where I'm at. So I agree with you that the inventory is going to be a problem and maybe keep prices buoyed a bit so we don't see that huge crash in prices. But death by 1,000 cuts, right? If your neighbor goes on the market at $890 and you got to sell, you probably go on the market at $880. And then you replicate that multiple times in a neighborhood over a year, and all of a sudden now the going price is $780, where a year ago it was $880.
So Matt and Laura, I mentioned them earlier. We just closed on their property. We listed it at $720, and I think a week before, the house across the street, same model, they listed at $725. And we had been talking about $720 for a while, and we went under contract. We had a couple offers, went under contract at $707. Closed at $707. That house across the street, it's been on the market, dropped to $710. There's nobody looking at it. It's going to go under 600, or it's going to go down into the sixes.
Yeah.
So you got to be ahead of the market as far as listing right now.
Right.
At or below. And as far as like what I use, I don't look at sale comps. I look at what's on the market. How long has it been on the market? Where's the price? Look at what's gone pending, what's gone under contract. Where is it at?
Right.
And sometimes agents, I'll call them up and I try to be as friendly as possible. I'm not trying to take their business away. I just want to know, hey, can you give me an idea where it's at? They'll tell me, or they'll give me a roundabout idea and, get all that intel and make a wise decision or give that to my clients to make the decision.
Isn't it amazing how far a little bit of like nicety goes in this business? It's like, there's so many realtors that have either an attitude or an ego, or they just don't have the interpersonal skills where it's like, I don't want to use this realtor by name because he's awesome and people will probably be mad, but he'll call listing agents and just through being polite, the listing agent will be like, you know what, man, offer $1,021,000 and it's going to be yours. I just want to work with you because you're a cool guy. And that's like not so ethical, but he's so fucking polite. And he's just well known in the neighborhood of being a good guy and never pulling any shenanigans and not trying to put two deals under contract at once and bait and switch with the down payment and the lender and stuff. That's just like, people want to work with him because he's nice. And he's made a ton of money in the last 10 years because he's nice.
Yeah, I always try to do that. And I want them to want to work with me. Right. So it gives my clients an upper hand and, a clean offer. So the magazine business details everything because as soon as somebody gets the magazine, oh, hey, you misspelled this on page 24.
Oh, dude, Chris hates it when the second he prints like our live event venues for our coaching events, he'll go through it. He'll come up to me and he'll be like, dude, I forgot to capitalize this T. I'm like, Chris, nobody except for you gives a shit. And sure enough, once in a blue moon, somebody will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, man, there's a typo on page 21. I'm like, 3-day coaching experience at a rock star price where you're meeting with some amazing people and you give a shit about the typo on page 21.
You didn't capitalize Tuesday. So that's given me a real super attention to detail. And when I'll get a contract and everything's left blank and either so in California, you have your contingencies and what have you. And when people leave the inspection default, the contingency to the default, which is 17 days, it's like, do you not care, or do you are not paying attention? Like, nobody's going to give you 17 days to go through the house.
Right.
Not. I mean, we might be in a buyer's market, but it's not that much.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're not paying attention, and I think, oh man, this is going to be a headache. And I'll let my clients know, okay, this agent, they had everything together. They were, in fact, this shout out to Albert this agent that was representing the buyers on this one, very professional, attention to detail. Everything was covered. There was no ambiguity in the contract. Or I'll have escrow like call and say, hey, who do we bill for this, because it wasn't specified in a contract.
Right.
And so attention to detail is huge, and just be friendly. Like, make it seem like it's going to be a fun experience. You could be a dick down the road, but if you want to get the offer accepted, like, be nice, be friendly, return calls, return texts.
Yeah.
And,
I had to remind a lot of people the last 10 years, when it was just a seller's market, if you think about it from the perspective of the buyer, and I'm like, hey man, the buyer paid $100,000 over asking. They had 4 days to inspect the house. They've got the stress of like not being able to have a loan continue. We get 22 days in and everybody's ready to blow up the deal or stab somebody or leave a 1-star review. I'm like, the buyer just needs a win. Can we give them $500 somewhere? Be like, all right, we're going to pay $500 to rekey the doors, or let me give them a $500 credit and say that it's coming from the realtor or something. Like, they just want a win. This is just like human psychology. You can, like that old saying, beatings will continue until morale improves. That's what it's been like to be a buyer the last 10 years until about the last 10 months. And I would suggest that to the realtors. I'm like, hey man, we're talking about $1 million house, couple $100,000 in net equity going to the client, $30,000 commission checks going to you for, writing a contract. Like, can we just get the buyers a win? And sure enough, man, you give the buyer something like, oh, cool. Thanks. We're going to put that towards buying new drapes or something. It's like, this is just basic human psychology of being nice and trying to craft a win-win for somebody when, it was hard to do for buyers the last 10 years. And now I do feel like there's some buyers that the pendulum they think has swung a little too far the other way. They're like, I want a deal, screw the seller, we're taking everything. And it's like, well, no, the seller's got to get a win too, because they're getting rid of their house. Like, it's a big deal for people. So it's just funny. The real estate market is funny.
Yeah, you always want both parties to be happy. Or you don't want to feel like you've been taken advantage of.
Right.
Because you might finish through to the deadline. But let's say you come up with something that maybe they didn't completely disclose.
Right.
You're the first thing you're going to do, if you felt like they took advantage of you and that you abused you, man, you're going to call your lawyer and you're going to make a stink about it.
Right.
Where maybe if you felt like everything was perfect and maybe the seller didn't know of something and it was an honest mistake, hey, you might let it slide. So, right. When you get everything you want, be careful. Because you might get something you don't want down the road.
100%.
So like I brought you those jams. Byron is his name.
Oh,
and
yeah. By the way, what's Byron's last name? We're gonna
Byron Graham.
We got to give a shout out to Mixed Berry Jam, Aloha Pineapple Jam. This is called Jams.
Actually, it's Fostering Jiu Jitsu.
Fostering Jiu Jitsu is the Instagram, and then he's got hashtag Jams for Jiu Jitsu.
So him and his wife Britt, they make these jams when they make jams. And it's all natural and
Wild Blue Belt Jam. I'm excited to dig
They're
into
really
these.
good, and it's for a charity, and he'll help kids that can't afford jiu-jitsu with like gis and stuff like that, and help with their tuition. And I just sold his house. He'd been there for 20 years, and he's a black belt. Just recently got his black belt, and we were so like aligned with handling the transaction as far as the buyers. They asked for a ton of credit on. It was. House was built in 1937, so you can imagine there was a few things that needed done. And we were in line, and we wanted to give them a win, and they were happy. He was happy, and it was just in tune with not.
Do these guys, do they make jams for a living?
Yeah. So actually, he just put an offer on a house in Iowa, Council Bluffs, Iowa. So they were living out of a van, like by choice.
right. Like vagabond lifestyle,
Yeah,
not like living down by the river in a van.
He sold his house, they've been traveling the country for the last year or so. And they go to these different jiu-jitsu schools and they'll take their jams and they'll sell them to the students there. And he wants to open a jiu-jitsu school. So he found Council Bluffs and he's been texting me every day like, hey, what do you think of this? And they ended up putting an offer on a house that was built like before 1937. Like he must like old houses because
Right.
I think this was like 1910 or something like that. And but it's like on 2 acres and he's going to pay cash for it. And he's super happy, and he wants to open a jiu-jitsu school out there. So,
amazing,
shout out
man.
to Byron
and what they make jams, but this is just combining his passion of like the business and then giving back to the jiu-jitsu community, or does he have some crazy story about somebody buying him his first gi or what?
No,
I gotta interview this guy.
I don't know. Him and I have been rolling together for about 10 years, and we are always friends. And when he decided to sell his house, he called me up and said, hey, you want to sell my house? And sure. In fact, I have another listing that's a jiu-jitsu guy. So him and his wife, they're selling. They want to move out. And so actually the first big lease that I did was a commercial building for a jiu-jitsu school. So just you're talking about your sphere.
Right.
So, and they signed the lease the day before the president went on air with COVID. So, yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, the timing was really tough. But luckily the owner, actually it's a purchase option, so they're going to end up buying the building. And but it was the landlord was willing to give them quite an extension on making those payments initially, and it all worked out. Their school it's a real high visibility sector jiu-jitsu. Sean Roberts and his mother Laura own it, and it's like on a thoroughfare in Chino. It's
Nice.
like the main street, and it's a glass building. I mean, it's like three sides are glass.
Amazing.
And it used to be a furniture store, and you can't help but see what's going on inside. So, in the evening when the lights are on, he's got like 50, 60 people out on the mats. And it's just a huge billboard for jiu-jitsu, and their business has grown quite a bit. So
what's it called? Sector Jiu-Jitsu?
Sector Jiu-Jitsu
Awesome.
in Chino, yeah.
Nice. And where are you working out these days? Like, what's your home gym?
So I got my black belt at Gracie Baja in Chino,
Okay, cool.
Rafael Oliveira, and I haven't been going there much lately. Marcus has been, after wrestling, he wanted a more like competition-focused school, so he's been going to Sector, which is Sean's got when they go to tournaments, it's like 60 deep. They have a ton of people that go. And so he's been going there and liking it. And I roll about once a week, do open mats, go to a class every now and then. So I'm old man jiu-jitsu, or dick jitsu. I do a lot of wrist locks and stuff. Shout out to Pete the Greek. Did an article with him.
Dude, Pete the Greek.
He was blown up.
I was just messaging with him on Instagram the other day to come do a seminar in either Vegas or LA, either one, so I can make it. And we're going to have him on the podcast, I think.
He's awesome. But don't be his uki. Don't let him. No, dude.
No.
Trust me. I can't think of the guy's name. We did an interview with Pete at Cavalry Chapel Wrestling, which they had a huge wrestling.
We wrestled against them in high school.
Okay.
Highland High School, we wrestled against Cavalry Chapel, and it was always a good match.
Yeah, so Jordan Bell, our last name was Bell. Anyway, he was Suzuki. Man, I was like furious. Like I would tell him, stop. It's good. We got it. We got the picture. But man, like wrist locks, dude, they're everywhere. So, and I don't, like in training, I don't get them on people, but I'll let them know they're there and they give me an arm.
Right.
And they'll give me an arm bar. And to that point, we did an article with Josh Barnett. Man,
Wait, I know the name, but I can't place who he is.
So Josh Barnett, they call him the War Master. He's like big dude. He was in the UFC, did a lot of stuff in Japan. Eric Paulson, he trained at Eric Paulson. Eric Paulson's got a school out in Brea or Yorba Linda in that area. And so it's catch wrestling. So like catch wrestling, man, jiu-jitsu people, pay attention to catch wrestling. It's basically no-gi. I mean, it's like, it's a good, man, there's so much stuff in catch that you can use that if it's within the rule set, it's awesome.
Right.
Like, there's just, man, I love him, but Josh got Dean Lister in this choke. I don't know all the Japanese names. People throw out Japanese, like, I don't know what the fuck that means.
Right.
But anyway, it was so you think of side control, you always want that underhook. You know, if you're on top, you want that far side underhook. Well, he didn't have that far side underhook, but he would grab his inside thigh and just would wrench back, and it could be a neck crank, but not really. It's really a choke or a strangle if you're a, what's his name? Danaher,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it's catch wrestling, like pure catch wrestling, super effective technique, but so much of that stuff, like that's like a hidden thing. Like Eric Paulson, follow him on Instagram because he posts some old shit that he did that was filmed back in the 80s or 90s. And, man, there's some really good stuff there.
That's awesome, man.
Jiu-Jitsu folks, look at catch wrestling.
So either real estate, Jiu Jitsu Magazine, Journey, stuff you're looking forward to in 2023. What did I forget to ask you, man?
That's a lot. So I don't know.
We jumped all over. What are you most looking forward to in 2023? Like, obviously, your real estate company is taking off, BLDG, short for building. Like, you're looking to grow that and maybe start hiring people and not just be a sole practitioner. Like, what are you looking forward to in 2023?
Yeah, right now I'm a team of one. I've got a transaction coordinator, Mike, that has helped me in the past. He's a good guy. And, I want to grow it. Like, I'm real picky and I'm kind of a perfectionist, so which is not really that great. I mean, it's good on some things, but, I try to put everything aligned before I move forward. So I haven't brought on another agent. With the market turning down, I've kind of focused a lot of energy on marketing. So just got some new initiatives planned and kind of working on my checklists. I think you mentioned the Checklist Manifesto in
amazing book.
Really good book. So I'm like working on my checklists and stuff. I mean, I'm still busy. I got a bunch of listings, got transactions and stuff closing. But, it's the holidays right now when we're doing this. So I'm being a little bit lazy as far as making my calls. I bought your book.
Thank you.
I bought your book, and I bought another one for my accountability partner. I sent it to him, and then I opened it up, and I read the thing about the writing a check out to somebody you don't want to give it to. I've that's as far as I've gotten in the book, man.
You're like, I can't write the check, dude. I'm scared to write the check.
I don't want to write a check to Hillary Clinton or Gavin Newsom's election for next year, so I haven't gotten past that first page. But I will, I promise.
By the way, I'm writing. I'm going to write another book. I've been thinking about it forever. So hopefully somebody doesn't beat me to it now that I'm going to say it publicly. It's like you and I are kind of the same thing. It's like red dot, blue state, right? Like I love California, and there's so much California has to offer, but they've just kind of gone down the rabbit hole of swinging the pendulum too far to the left and never like tacking back to the center. So I'm going to write a book called Red Dot Blue State about being a conservative.
Have you got the domain yet?
Yeah, I think I do own it.
Oh, you better. So Chris,
can you check Chris to make sure I still own that? I'm almost positive it's on
You've owned
GoDaddy.
it for years.
Okay, cool.
So Chris Voss, you know who that is?
Yeah.
Never Split the Difference.
Amazing book.
So he went on Jocko's podcast and he talked about his new real estate book that he's got. It's called The Full Fee Agent.
So he wrote that with a friend of mine, Steve Scholl, who was my coach for years.
Okay, awesome. I just heard him on a podcast. In fact, I'm listening to it. I haven't finished it yet. So immediately I looked up the domain, The Full Fee Agent and Full Fee Agent. They're both
available.
So I got them.
Oh.
So I'm going to do an Amazon store. And some people do that. Although then I'm thinking, fuck, what if he still has those FBI connections and he figures out it's me?
Chris is a cool guy.
Off of his.
I've met
traffic.
Chris a couple times and seen him talk and was on stage with him once, just as a volunteer. Super, super good guy. Yeah, he'll just neguate the domain away from you.
I was going to say, if he wants the domain, have him call me. I'm sure we can work out something.
Yeah. We had a guy on the podcast who basically made legal ecstasy, and he's in a mastermind group with Chris, and they're good friends. So we might hook up with that connection one time to have Chris on the podcast if he's out here in Vegas. I can sneak
that'd
him
be
on.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's a big deal now. I should have got him on 5 years ago when he wasn't such a big deal. Last question, because this is always my favorite question to ask people: favorite movie and why?
Oh, jeez, I heard that I was on the way out here. I was listening to a podcast. So by far, Risky Business.
Oh, such a good movie.
And it had everything. So like Entrepreneurial, you know, the future enterprisers, they had the memo minder, click it once, memo, and you know, the whole story. When the magazine business was going really good, I bought a 928, the car that was in there. I bought a GTS.
The 928 was the Corvette that had the light, or the
Not a
Porsche, the Porsche that had the lights come out of the
Porsche.
top, right?
Porsche,
Sorry.
Yeah, that had the pop-up headlights.
Yeah, it was like, it looked like a fish or something. It was kind of weird looking.
Yeah, well, they would pop forward.
Oh, pop forward.
Yeah, so the 928 GTS, they only imported like 250 of them that final year, and only a few of them were 5-speed, or not 5-speed. They were manual, and I had one, and I sold it. So yeah, fuck. I bought it for 40. I sold it for 44. No, I bought it for 44. I sold it for 40, and man, that and turning down Pete on the
Yeah, how much is that 928 worth now?
probably that one. It was, I think it had like 36,000 miles on it. I took really good care of it. Man, it probably in auction, bring a trailer, if you ever go on there, probably about 130, 140 right now.
Yeah.
So one of these days I'll get it back. But yeah, that was a huge regret.
All right, so Risky Business. Hey, what's the movie? Oh, I can't remember the name. It was right before Risky Business. It's like before Tom Cruise blew up, where they're like, he's like a kid, and they go to Mexico, and like Shelley Long's in it, and they go to Mexico, and they're gonna get like their dad's upholstery rolled, and they're like, yeah, but you know, in TJ sometimes they roll the upholstery and put, you know, manure in there. So Tom Cruise as a kid had to like sit there and watch the car the whole time as they're reupholstering. Chris, you gotta look this up. What's the movie with Tom Cruise, Shelley Long, where they like go to Mexico to get this upholstery re-rolled? And it's like, it's kind of an 80s version of like American Pie. It's like a coming of age story. I think Shelley Long's like, what's it called?
Losing it.
Yeah. You go back and watch that if it's been a while, because it still holds up.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Back then, all the movies that I tell my kids, like, things were different back then. Every movie was about getting laid.
Oh, 100%.
Even the movies, like, my wife's favorite movie is 16 Candles.
Yeah, it's about getting laid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like my sister can't have a healthy, normal
Howard the Duck
relation.
is about getting laid.
Howard the Duck, yes, also about getting laid. I feel like my poor sister can't have like a normal, healthy relationship, you know, where there's like some ups and downs with a significant other, because she watched too many of those damn movies. You know, it's like 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Dirty Dancing, like Say Anything, Breakfast Club. It's like, if it's not this picturesque movie relationship, it's like, it's just not real. Yeah, so those 80s movies, I think, ruined a bunch of women's expectations of what us men can actually live up to.
Yeah, that's rough.
Man, I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to stick around and talk off the record and have another cigar. And
really appreciate it.
We'll have you on anytime you're up here in Vegas, man.
Cool. Sounds
All right.
good.
Talk soon.
Take care.